Welcome to My on Mondays, an explorative approach to the possessive my through narratives, art, and sound. Each Monday brings a new creation and unique perspective. My on Mondays is brought to you by Ming Studios, a contemporary art space and international artist residency program dedicated to the exhibition, experience, and exploration of arts and culture. Along with exhibiting artists from around the world, Ming also serves the community by hosting innovative programs including performances, workshops, screenings, readings, artist talks, and other cultural activities. For more information, or if you'd like to participate in My on Mondays, you can visit our website at mingstudios.org. Hello, and welcome to the 177th episode of My on Mondays. Today we have another episode by our three angsty poets, who gathered once again, initially to chat about poetry, but the chatting turned to ranting, the ranting turned to rage. The bombardment of news, fake news, real news, personal news, churned into storm. And they remind us yet again, now more than ever, create art. Tomas Baiza is originally from San Jose, California, and now finds himself in Boise, Idaho. He's the author of the novel Delivery, a Pocho's Accidental Guide to College, Love, and Pizza Delivery, published by Running Wild Press in 2023, and the mixed genre collection A Purpose to Our Savagery from Rise Press. Delivery was selected as the 2024 Treasure Valley Reads featured novel, and Tomas's writing has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize, the Best of the Net, and Best American Short Stories anthologies. Tomas has fenced in Italy, been rescued by a helicopter from the Sierra Nevada, fended off wild dogs while hitchhiking in rural Morelos, Mexico, and once delivered a dozen pizzas to a Klingon-themed orgy at a sci-fi convention. When he's not writing, Tomas is running trails or obsessing over bonsai trees. Rebecca Evans writes the difficult, the heartful, the guidebooks for survivors. Her work has appeared in Narratively, The Rumpus, Brevity, and more. She's earned 2 MFAs, one in creative nonfiction, the other in poetry from the University of Nevada, Reno at Lake Tahoe. She's authored a full-length poetry collection, Tangled by Blood, published by Moontide Press in 2023, and her second poetry book, Safe Handling, was just published this year. She shares space in a tiny Idaho town with her sons and 4 Newfoundlands. Christian Winn is a fiction writer, poet, nonfiction writer, teacher of creative writing, and producer of literary and storytelling events based in Boise, Idaho. He's the author of 2 story collections, Naked Me and What's Wrong with You is What's Wrong with Me, and the forthcoming novels Crocodile and My History with Careless People and Other Stories. His work has appeared in McSweeney's, Plowshares, the Chicago Tribune's Printers Row Journal, Glimmer Train, Joyland, Expat Press, Tri-Quarterly, Gulf Coast, and many other fine magazines and journals. And from 2016 to 2019, he was the Idaho Writer in Residence, the state's highest literary honor.
Welcome to our 12th Angsty Show. We're the 3 Angsty Poets, which includes myself, Rebecca Evans, along with Tomas Baiza and Christian Winn. Today we're talking about our angst, perhaps everyone's angst, with the news. So as artists, the heartbeat in the world really ends up influencing and inspiring our work, but it can also fuel and fire and devour our work as well. So I'm super excited to hear what you guys think, the challenges while dealing with the news as an artist. And Christian, I'm tossing it to you first.
Oh, man, it's a big question.
It's a huge topic. This is a 3-hour show.
We are, what is this? We're recording on St. Patty's Day, so we can get a little rowdy.
Yeah. Do you have green on? Christian, you guys...
you'd have to look underneath my... I have it hidden.
Okay.
So
no.
I see it as one of your layers back there.
So you're okay. And you have green in your tattoos, so you're good.
Oh, yeah, I do. Okay, cool.
All right. Sorry.
I know.
Got off track there.
And I used to think I was Irish until I got the 23andMe. And so I'm actually just Welsh and English and like a little tiny bit of, something African continent, and that's like I'm very white.
Wow.
I'm a white.
I am very white. I'm all German, Hungarian, and Russian.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just learned that Tomas is a conquistador. According to some quite, I don't know, sort of
according to a woman who runs the grill in southern Indiana.
Yeah.
I'm one of them conquistadors.
I'm getting him a name tag that says that, the conquistador.
Oh, that's part of the news. We've been watching a lot of the current administration's bullshit, as we expected, but might be even at a higher level than we, at least for me, than I even expected, or I even understood was going to be happening. But that actually just fuels the angst and also the want to push back and actually, rise up. That's what we're doing here as best we can as three angsty poets. So I don't know. I've been channeling this into my work, I guess, for a while as far as the news cycle. And here on this program, I've had a couple, 2 or 3 poems that I've shared that have to do with sort of the entity of America being a bit on fire. And as that's just kind of come out of a lot of my travels around the U.S., but also listening to the news on the radio, on podcasts, and watching it, and kind of, I do try to be fair and balanced to a degree, as much as I can stand it.
Fair
but
and balanced news source.
I know, or I don't know if I'm balanced, but I guess listening to the news. But I have been channeling it for sure, so to speak. Channeling the news, and I don't know, using catchphrases, like income levers, are kind of referring to sort of some of the Trumpisms. I could pull up a couple of my pieces and look at those, but just kind of like channeling the language of the zeitgeist. And I have a little bit I want to share when we read, but it's just like figuring out, sort of how to channel that in kind of honestly like a bit of a ranty way to begin with, and then trying to make sense of it when I look at it back in my journal. This is mostly in my prose poetry and mostly in my, short, not prose poetry, and kind of just snippets. So I've definitely been fueled by it. And I've always been, so we've talked about this a little bit before, but I've always, especially with the music, the sad music, the thoughtful, maybe angry music, kind of channeled, something, kind of triggered something in me in a good way as a creative person. I feel like the news kind of does that to a degree, so it doesn't shut me down too much yet. I mean, maybe I'm a little bit too ranty at times because of it, but at the same time, I haven't really kind of morphed it into my fiction as much. It's something I've never been sort of a writer. I mean, these little American snapshots or snapshots of people out there I've written about, sort of in my fiction as like, this is their life, it is sort of political in its own way just by putting it out there, but I've never really been like an issue-based fiction writer, but I feel like it's snuck into my poetry maybe more than it needs to so, as of late. But it's just been, since 2016, in that particular election, it's just like that constant sort of barrage of just these ridiculous policies and just ridiculous words coming out of ridiculous people's mouths. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to write some of that shit down. And
don't you feel like you can't even repeat some of them though? Like it's not, to push it into your art, what a huge juxtaposition. Like here's art and here's these horrible phrases.
And here's my poem titled Drill Baby Drill.
Oh, well, I know. I'm sure there's somebody who's written, just talk, I won't even recite what I've read before here, but it is like so many. It just kind of, or I just usually will write my, I'll kind of free write most of my prose poetry, and just like I said, see what comes out. But I tap into it a bit, especially when I kind of landed on the theme of sort of American architecture in just a general way, like what's going on with the structure of this fucking country, and the world in general. I mean, it's a worldwide sort of situation we're in here. So I definitely have been fueled by it. So I don't know, Tomas, what about you? I mean, how does it enter your work?
I don't tend to write first from the perspective of reflecting something in the news. I tend to, I think, write about subjects or characters or situations that resonate through the news. And so if I'm going to be writing about people or characters who, for better or for worse, just can't lie down and quit, or the concept of oppression, self-oppression, other oppression, if I write a story that hits on those notes, it's pretty easy for a reader to say, oh, I recognize that because I've been feeling this way lately from all the things that have been happening, or I totally understand where he's coming from. It's pretty rare that I'll actually put my finger right on it. A couple years ago, I needed a break from working on editing the novel, and so I wrote this alternate universe version of the pizza delivery driver, and it was a pandemic story where the characters are dealing with either, depending on your perspective on it, either impromptu or ad hoc body deformities or enhancements. Mm-hmm. And they're not sure where it's coming from, and society is not sure how to deal with it. And at one point, I make a crack that the dumb shit president got on and suggested maybe drinking bleach. And that's probably the most on the nose I've ever gotten, right? But because I was just so fucking over it. Yeah. So I put that in the story, but that's about as close as I came to writing about what's going on in the moment on purpose. Right. The rest of it is usually just like a strong reflection of, or in the case of the reading that I'll do today, a terrible coincidence, but it's not really a coincidence because it's all part of the same story of oppression. Right. And I'm curious, as somebody, I think the person in this room who reads maybe the most sort of sci-fi, fantasy, or kind of outside maybe speculative fiction, we'll call it, or poetry. I mean, what do you like? What are some of your favorites? I just am so generally unfamiliar with, sort of the nuances of what those kind of stories are doing. But there's so much political stuff and so much societal stuff, and so I don't know. It's like these great metaphors, these great sort of like larger sort of figuring out sort of what the shadows on the cave wall are, kind of thing. The allegories and everything. So in that kind of those genres. So who does it well in your opinion? Well, I'm not a scholar of all this stuff, but maybe. And this is super low-hanging fruit, but let's say George R.R. Martin. Mm-hmm. A constant theme in his writing, going back to his short stories, is power and what it does to people. And it seems to me that in his worldview, power obviously exists. It can be used well, but ultimately power is going to corrupt and kill. And even a good person in a position of power will ultimately be brought down by that position of privilege. And so be careful what you wish for. And if there are people of power around you, get the fuck away from them. And so that's pretty much, I haven't ever written or read anything from him where it's pretty obvious that he's using something in the real world as an allegory other than extreme, distant history. Mm-hmm. Nothing in terms of current events, but it's pretty obvious to me that he has a very, very cynical view of power and its effect on human individuals and systems. So that's, I guess, where I would say you might argue that he's an issues-based writer. Yeah, and I find that some T.C. Boyle a little bit here. He was like ripped from the news, his headlines, sort of about cloning or about, based climate change is a big thing. He's clever, sort of legalizing drugs is something, but in his fiction. But also George Saunders is probably my favorite contemporary writer that way, because he is kind of funny when he does. He's quite funny when he does it, darkly funny in some of his works. But yeah, he does it so well. But it's I guess speculative in a certain way, talking about like sort of the. He's cynical about systems of oppression. Yeah, well, like Escape from Spiderhead, that story that's all about, sort of the penal colony that they're injecting, sort of all these, inmates with, chemicals in order to get them to be basically rats, sort of they're, experimenting on. Yep. And then just like Love Letter was a great story of his that's a little more recent that David Sedaris is a cool reading of on the New Yorker fiction podcast. And it's like all about what you're just talking about, that idea of power and kind of what we're seeing now. And he wrote it probably 2 years ago, and it's, not that it was that much different. The writing was on the wall. But anyway, I continue on. I went off script a little bit there, but I think it's interesting to think about who's doing it well if I'm not doing it well. So
yeah, I think I agree, Tomas, that I think when it's done well, it's not so it's more obliquely done, right? Yeah. My angst with art and the news is when people purposefully are trying to get something published and they're writing towards the news. Like that, they're writing just to market something or just to make a buck off of it. And I don't create that way, and I really don't appreciate art that way. It feels forced. Right? Or they'll pull something up that was already published and try to republish it, right? Because it's timely. And so that those timely pieces, I think you can feel when it comes from the heart, like Saunders, right? You read something and it's like, this is his creative process, and it just happens to align. I did write, and you read a fiction piece of mine with the current president, where he goes to Iceland and chokes on Kentucky Fried Chicken.
He could have gone to Greenland. Yeah.
Sounds hilarious.
Yeah. And I'll send it to you. I would love some feedback because I'd like to get it out there now because I think it's timely. But when I wrote it, it wasn't, right? It was like in between or before he was elected, and I was just writing these creative stories from angels looking down and in control, and they were manipulating not just him but the world around him, right? And so that was a really interesting perspective to kind of drop into. So I was writing a bunch of short stories with that perspective going on. So I think like I like it when I'm inspired, whether it's rant, rage, sadness, whatever, and that spawns creativity for me. So I appreciate, whatever's going on in the world. I feel sometimes I don't have the right to write about some things or to create regarding some things. Maybe I'm not as informed about them, so I don't feel right like I have enough knowledge to put something out there, or I'm the right person. Like there's so many other people culturally that probably should be speaking on behalf. But I think there's still an obligation as an artist, if you feel the call to write, that you should, and be a voice for maybe others who cannot be a voice for themselves in the moment. So I think my angst is really when people are trying to push and play on tragedy and atrocity just to get work published. Like that bugs the crap out of me.
It does happen. Well, you can often. I mean, I don't have much of a stomach for it either, because you're like, oh man, you can just see what they're doing here. And even I will admit that our man George Saunders, a couple of pieces for me were like a little bit on the nose, Yeah,
you can feel it.
He had one called Adams, which was a play on like Saddam Hussein. So it was like, but it was funny, but it was like. It was a little bit, you could see what he was doing more than usual. But
those are almost more like parables than stories.
Yes. And I mean, like the Margaret Atwood, all that. She does a great job of, holding kind of the mirror in a certain or kind of a skewed mirror. But
I think she's a prophet at this point.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like Octavia Butler as well, like with climate change stuff, and just the world at large, and that's cool when you do like read something that maybe is 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. I mean, good old Mr. Orwell,
Right?
I mean, there's a lot, you're getting a lot of those kind of quotes from Animal Farm coming out now.
I know.
100 years later? I don't know. Maybe not quite, but close to 100 years later.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so.
And 1984.
And you
Those
write, though. Oh, that's true.
Yeah,
he
a lot
did
of
write
quotes
that
from
one.
1984 coming
yes,
out
exactly.
too. Yeah.
That was
Yeah, both those books right now are like that's all the memes I see anymore. Just those two.
Right, that is true.
451.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And you do write a bit about sort of I feel like in your military kind of angle, or even just sort of trauma and sort of just sexual abuse and things. You kind of stare that down, and so that's a kind of political writing, and maybe comes from a bit of the news or kind of your experience with maybe things that affect the news.
I think what got my goat was when people were, and it was more celebrities that were writing into the Me Too moment that were not trauma based, like they did not have that traumatic experience, but they were aligning themselves with that. And I was like, what are you doing? And I appreciate them taking a stance, but the way some of them were doing it, I just felt was like to get themselves back in the limelight. And so for me, whatever I write, whether it's military or towards, that Me Too, topic, is from my own personal experience, right? And so I think because I write mostly narrative, and so the same would be with the news. Like if it happens to connect with the news from my personal experience, that resonates with me. That's where my inspiration ends up being.
Right.
When those two things fuse together, that works really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess, I don't know. When do you ignore it? I have a hard time ignoring it. Is that ever good for you guys? Is to like shut your be like in the mountains away from it all?
Well, here's what.
Does that help?
No, because then I just worry. I like with what's going on now. There's just such a bombardment, and overwhelm. So I literally put on a 10-minute timer and read the headlines. And then if something calls to me like, this is important and I need to be informed, I feel like I have to be informed. I have children to take care of, right? I feel like I have to be informed as an artist and a citizen, right? So all of those reasons to be informed, but to also take care of myself. So trying to find that balance when there's so much horrific things happening right now. So that's what I do. So I can't completely turn it off. That would not be healthy for me, you know. What about you, Tomas?
I learned my lesson overdosing on the news in the last year prior to the election. Because I'll admit, I became an absolute fanboy and let myself fall into the joyous anticipation of our current president, who was not then our current president, being charged and hopefully going to jail.
Yes.
And I needed to feel as though there was progress towards a just outcome. I needed it really bad. And
you were not
we
alone.
all see how that worked out.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I disrespect mainstream media now more than ever. I respect independent media now more than ever. And still fuck you all. I'm not giving up on the news, but like Rebecca, I ration it. I'll follow certain things. I'm letting myself pay much more attention to the things closer to home. Because it's a good thing to do, I think, in general, and two, I can do more about it.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to ration it. And it doesn't necessarily filter its way into my reading. It doesn't inspire me, or my writing. It doesn't inspire me to write. If I'm inspired to write, it's because something's speaking from within me, as opposed to outside. And I might tap into the things that are around me.
Yeah.
You know, like that cup of coffee or that bullshit news item that I saw. But that's not what spurs me to write.
Right. And I agree, like tapping into what's happening locally. And the other place I tap into, just to share this, is like I listen to the BBC. I want to listen to somebody that has no skin in the game, right? And to me, you're going to get a little more accuracy that way. So I try to find news sources, not just the BBC, but that out there that have no skin in the game. And what are they, putting out there? Radio Boise does,
but are also
some really
well
great
sourced,
stuff.
and
well
that's the thing.
sourced.
Like, that's something that's important for sure. And people like to think that, I feel like these days, just to get on that tangent for a sec, but like people do think that this is independent news, but it's like, they're just grabbing this stuff. If you don't really have people also fact checking you within your newsroom, even in your friend group, if you're doing like a podcast.
Anymore, a newsroom is somebody's bedroom, right?
This is not fact check news, by the way. The three Angsty Poets. This is all our opinion.
Well, I know. Joe
I don't know
Rogan,
about you two. I'm telling the truth.
We're coming for you, Mr. Rogan. Come on. Anyway, yes, that said, gosh, there's lots to talk about. Much. I'm like, things keep coming to mind. I did. I just remembered, and I shouldn't have forgotten about it. There's a short story called The Lands East of Here, which is a short story I wrote in like 2018, 2019.
Ancient history.
I know. And it was a story. I mean, I did lean into it. I mean, it was obviously during the first Mr. Trump administration that had me plenty worked up, but it is a story that is about things disappearing, and it's like literally like this guy, the narrator, is sitting in this neighborhood in a town and city kind of like Boise's North End, and he's just watching things literally like the lamppost, the third floor of his neighbor's house, the doorknobs on his bedroom door. A kid next door is missing fingers all of a sudden. It's like everything is literally like disappearing.
I think I remember reading this.
Yeah, I did a reading actually at Ming of it with Riley. She is a harp player. It was really cool, but it was fun. But anyway, that was pre-COVID, and so I mean it was interesting, and also ancient history, and as far as what we're dealing with now in certain ways. But it was like something I leaned into. I remember, but it was hopefully not too didactic. Glimmer Train people liked it, so that was kind of cool. But it was fun. I mean, I mess like, and then like in the story, spoiler alert, everything comes back together at the end, but it's all mismatched. Like it's like this every object, everything, and it's like the narrator doesn't recognize it, but he's sort of sitting there in bliss, like at the end. It's sort of a Vonnegut type moment or something like that.
That's actually really similar in concept to the story that I mentioned earlier about these spontaneous body changes.
Okay.
Things start getting interchanged, seemingly at random, and what do you do with the new thing that is supposed to be you? Do you accept it as you, or do you see it as an alien appendage that you can never accept? It was my attempt to sort of deal with that sense of alienation that you felt in that moment at about the same time that you're talking about, maybe a year later.
Like organ transplants, really.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
do you reject
Who are
or
you
accept
now?
it?
Yeah.
I know. And that was, and it just said it was fun to write in certain ways because it was like all this stuff was disappearing into what they had heard was like the lands east of here. It was like this place, and people were like migrating there to see where all their stuff was and everything. It was just kind of fun to get into, but then as with all hopefully good writing, we're wanting to bring it down to character, and so I was trying to do that, and so that was one I hadn't even thought about before I walked into the studio today, but it was a fun one. But
cool.
So speaking of looking at our itinerary here, what do we have going? We have some readings coming up here, right?
Reading, Tomas, do you want to read first?
Yeah, sure. So
Okay.
I had a couple of things that I could have brought to read that were influenced by or tapped into things that were happening at the moment. But I wrote this, and my apologies to Christian because you saw this in a writing group.
No apology necessary.
But,
I hope not. I don't think so. Unless it's about me, I don't know.
No. I'd been sitting on this story for a long time because it's based on an actual event in my life.
Oh, okay.
But the things in the news, I think, were stirring me up, and so I didn't write about this consciously to address an issue. I wrote about it to really kind of get out the story that was in my head of what really happened, and then I think tap into the things that were happening around the country that aligned with my own experience. And then after I wrote the first draft, the Club Q shootings in Colorado Springs took place.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And in subsequent drafts, I had to make damn sure that I didn't go too dark because I kind of wanted to write a fairly serious but still absurdist piece. And so in rewriting it over and over, and you saw it when I totally did not stick the landing on the story. I was still working out the first draft. That was the first draft that you saw. And as the current events helped me to make the story shorter and a little bit more succinct, but didn't start it. And so this is a piece called Thank You, Cecilia.
Oh, yeah.
To the trans queen about to sit on my face, thank you. Thank you for prowling through the audience until you spot me, your kohl-rimmed eyes smoldering as you weave through the tables. You run one satin-gloved finger across the cheek of each man you pass, occasionally stopping to raise one of the long-stemmed roses that greeted guests at their tables and run it across an unsuspecting patron's lips. Men blush, and wives and girlfriends laugh and flirt with a singularly beautiful headliner who now stands before me. Thank you, Cecilia, for pulling harder on my left arm than Laura does on my right. Laura, innately jealous and still mad at me, flicks a final, desperate half-smile of resignation and lets go. Thank you for the tenderness with which you tie your black feather boa into a slip knot around my neck and lead me through the crowd, down to the narrow stage that bakes beneath white-hot luminaires. You sit me down on a plain wooden chair that rests in the middle of the otherwise empty stage. A gravelly voice fills the theater. The mistress of ceremonies, a barrel-chested cigar-chomping queen called Filthia Gurley, howls over the speakers. Please, Cecilia, don't hurt the poor boy. His saint of a mother would never forgive us. It's all part of the show. Filthia has never met my mother, and I suspect that my Mexican mother would remember if she had ever met anyone like Filthia Gurley. I suspect that my fraternizing with anyone like Filthia in a place like this would confirm some things my mother's been thinking about me lately. Thank you, Cecilia, for using your boa to bind my hands and feet to that plain wooden chair. There I sit before 200 screaming faces, helpless, exposed, alone. My heart drums in my ears because exposure is my nightmare and my dream. the secret dream of a narcissistic, insecure, selfish 19-year-old who in the coming years will understand more and more how badly he needs his ass kicked, his world turned sideways, his overconfidence and delusions about how this life actually works severely tested. I squint into the lights, at the churning crowd beyond the stage, and it is only now dawning on me why Philthea, not yet in drag and working the door before the show, barely acknowledged our fake IDs and gestured up the blood-red carpeted stairs. "Complimentary drink vouchers," Philthea growled as they handed me 2 pink tickets. "Tell the boys to seat yous at table 24. They pronounced you as ya, and 4 as foa, like Sonny Corleone. Philthea flicked the cigar from one corner of their mouth to the other. "And buckle up, sweetie," they added with a dismissive smirk at my girlfriend. "You're gonna see some things."
Nice.
Woo! That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, well, I believe you told me that you recently won a contest for a short story collection, and the judge commented that this is once they read that opening line.
Oh yeah,
that they were like, "That's my winner." That's a pretty good story.
That's the what have I gotten myself into line. Yeah, that's the first line in the manuscript.
It's amazing.
But yeah. And
what a hook.
The judge had perhaps had another favorite at that time coming into your manuscript, and then read that one and was like,
That was also a very heavily rejected story until it finally caught someplace.
Yeah.
It's that first line's a litmus test, right?
Yeah. Sitting on the face.
Yeah. But I mean, I did it on purpose, not just to be, well, I take it back. I totally did it to be provocative, but in a way that is intended to be a litmus test, not just for the thrill of shocking you, but if you can get past that, then you're curious.
Right.
Yeah.
You want to know what the F happens after that. And so that's what I was hoping for. And there were a lot of editors who were not curious.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I had a couple were like, seriously with that first line?
Yeah.
And I didn't respond, but I'm like, yeah, totally seriously with that first line.
Right.
Oh.
And you think you chose to read that today. So in the news realm or the filter, I mean, was it a response in certain ways to sort of the rhetoric you heard on the news?
It wasn't a response, but I not to go into this whole personal history, but I had the extreme good fortune to have queer and transgender friends from really early on, and really strong emotional relationships that changed me. And by the time the real event, the real trip to a club in San Francisco which was the seed for this story, took place, I was well on my way to letting myself be challenged in ways that I could tell were going to lead to a much better life, if not more confusing in the short term. And in real life, that night ended pretty badly because the person I was with was not on the same journey as me, was not as okay with how things might look externally, at least, or that gender boundaries were not firmly respected in ways that they understood and had been raised with. And so I was already being challenged and totally, by that point, really up for it. Not to say that I knew what I was talking about, but cool. Tell me more.
Right.
This is unexpected, cool, and I'm loving this. And that's when I realized that, not everybody's on the same journey as me. And so that has always, I guess, I've always been thankful for that. Because it's not something that I was raised with by my mother, who was as open as she could be, but definitely not open by today's standards. But she laid the groundwork for me, taking it a step further, and I'm really, really thankful for that. And so I wanted to write a story where I had been reading about all of these raids and all of these really shit things going on in clubs across the country, and then I wrote this story based on my own experience at one event, and then the Club Q thing happens, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me? And then I thought, yeah, of course, that's kind of why I wrote it, right? So I stuck with the story, and I probably would have let it go after like the first 10 rejections, like, oh, all right, and I went too far on this one. But I just knew. I knew I had something, or I knew I had something that I wanted to get out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's awesome, and big congrats. That'll be the lead story in your new
if the editor doesn't change the order, I still want that to be the first one. But I could totally get if an editor said, that's going to make people put the book down. So I don't know. We'll see.
What is this titled of? Not the story, but the collection.
The collection is called Mexican Teeth: Stories and Assorted Artifacts of an Errant Chicanidad.
Okay.
Yay.
Well, that's out soon.
Soon. Early 2026.
In the larger universal time. Yes.
Never soon enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think Rebecca's next, right? Yeah.
And I think it's interesting how the news inspires you. So for me, I decided when I heard about Sinead O'Connor's death, I wrote a lot about her for the next couple weeks. She was so impactful in my life.
Yeah. And
so this piece has lines from her music.
Oh, nice.
Throughout it. I'm not going to sing them because no. But
come on.
It's entitled Shahuda, which is her name that she took on. In 1987, my sweet mate pulled me through our shared bathroom, played Troy again and again and again. We were so young then. I sat crisscrossed on military commercial carpet stretched across her dorm floor. We listened to that song all day. We, my military sisters and me, wished we could brave the world like her, shave our heads and show them, the men above us, over us, on top of us. Show them, the men, we needn't measure up to 3510, to military dress, to male standards of the female body. Tell me, when did the light die? We, my military sisters and me, wanted to write poems for black boys on mopeds. Instead, we left Kurdish refugees, left them to die. We didn't know. You mustn't kill more than 10% of a nation. We, my sisters and me, watched as no one listened. No one took her seriously. Instead, they took her down. They took her. They took, while we became quieter. If they hated me, they will hate you. In the center of that Kurdish conflict, we, my military sisters and me, huddled around picnic-like tables at the All Ranks Club, blowing off steam. Anybody want a drink before the war? I reached for the bathroom door. From behind, someone yanked my pony's tail. I thought it a joke, till I'm slammed into the wall, hot stench of Navy boy breath singeing my face. I pretend laughed as one hand smashed my throat, the other ripped my panties. One moment feels like 30. And the event, because that's what we, my military sisters and me, called these situations. In one moment, the event ends, and I forgot to piss. War was always worse from the inside for us, my military sisters and me. You'd think I'd report something like that. Never meant to hurt you. I'd no voice, my throat mushed with rage, with rape. I knew him as Navy because of his uniform. I knew myself as Navy too, a Navy bluebird, swallowing my bones and body away with drink and binge. We, my sisters and me, thought ourselves like her. We didn't know the way we aligned, one alongside the other, like the victims she stood up for. We never talked about this. We still don't. We purged, we starved, we tried to hold our knees tight. We maintained our bearing, no matter the price. See how the glass is raised? She never packed a bomb. She didn't need to. That day, 1987, when I heard Troy, was the first time I remember crying. It'll take another 22 years before I re-crisscross, this time on my shower floor, centered in my $1 million home, in my perfect appearing marriage, the whooshing, muffling my showered howls. I knew I needed to escape abuse, knew if I stayed, I'd be silenced for good. Is that a dagger or crucifix I see. My body shook despite shower steam. Oh, how the body knows fear before me. Perhaps I needed the heavy to search for myself. Will I want myself? I do not want what I haven't got. Did I tell you how Troy felt in my body? If you asked me then, 1987, I tell you that I felt nothing. Tell you the way I felt like ash. I tell you military bearing transfers to never-ending game facing, which by definition equals silence. Today, I wonder the difference between military training and predator grooming. If you ask me now the way that song felt, the way that song feels, I tell you it's like giving birth on a bathroom floor, like a fierce pulsing in your jugular, like raging fists within your womb, like breath tornado, turning tornado, erupting all your feelings for all of time. And yes, I'm still wild but not lost. All we, my sisters and me, wanted was for someone to leave the light on, to listen to the man at the liquor store, to fly closer to the sea, to live by our own policies and drink something new, anything new. It was dangerous after Sunday. We knew this. It was part of our training.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Wow.
Thank you.
How do you consider that a news kind of filtered story a little bit? You know, obviously it's experiential, the news of Sinead dying,
Yeah.
or...
I would say it's how the news probably influences my work, right? It's definitely like this heartfelt longing, howling, rage, all of it, of, you know, who that person meant to me. So a lot of times with current news, like I'll have that feeling about, you know, something in the news will trigger something in me from my life.
Right.
Right. And so I feel like that's me being true as an artist to the news. Right. Or, you know, how it has impacted me and maybe others. Right. So that's, I guess, how it influences me.
Yeah. No, that was very powerful. And
Thank you.
no bullshit. It's like staring stuff down like you do really so beautifully in your writing. And well, yeah, that reminded me of a different other story too. When you mentioned that you got into this poetry, this poem here through Sinead O'Connor's death, there's a story that I ended up calling All Her Famous Dead, which is when I was traveling around the country in like 1997, the summer. I'd left Seattle and was like just tooling around in my Volkswagen Westphalia, and it was over here in the Boise area, just all around. But I was like keeping a journal, as I've done for many years, or just in my own version of a journal. And then I kept writing in the back, like all these people kept dying, these like famous people.
Yeah.
That was the year that Princess Di ended up dying, like later in the year, and that Mother Teresa had died, Allen Ginsberg had died, Jimmy Stewart had died, Ben Hogan, if you're a golfer, Ben Hogan had died. Jeff Buckley died that year too. So I mean, so I kept writing these names down in the back, just like because I thought it was like, oh my god, and this was pre-internet news. I was just hearing about it and reading about it in the newspaper or something like that. So I just sort of got this list, and then later on. Sometime in the aughts, I think maybe I started writing this story or kind of morphing it into a story of somehow like All Her Famous Dead. And it's about a character this younger woman who's been having an affair with her mom's lover. So there's a lot of things going on, but all these things that she's kind of falling apart in her own way. She's having some struggles. And so all these people keep dying. And then in the fictional world of this story, people in her own life start dying too, a couple of them. But anyway, yeah, that was one that I kind of... I enjoyed doing that too in a lot of ways, and let it sit for a while, then figure out you can't just write a story about all these people dying in one year, these famous people. But I was like, okay, how do I do that?
It's interesting to me how celebrities do influence you, even if you're really strong in your own identity and your own voice. I mean, I remember like us young women, we were 19 and just looking at her and her strength, and she was young. She wasn't much older than us, right?
No.
And it's like, and she stood up and, and was just, obliterated,
She got taken
because of
down
it.
because
Yeah,
of
she
like
did.
being in the news cycle and that
Yeah.
vicious, gross, sort of way that people do tear down somebody once, make a political
on the,
statement.
Yeah,
Like,
and
really?
on night shows and whatnot. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, just ridiculing her, and she kept making music.
Yeah.
She still kept true to herself, and so I guess when she died, I just felt like all that anger that I felt that was given to her from so many people, like it really pissed me off how mistreated she was. And I wish I would have written more about her while she was alive, right? So it was like, why didn't I write about, I felt that even though, she's nobody that I know, but she just had that level of influence and inspiration for
Right.
me. Yeah.
Well, you turn it into beautiful art too. So I would think that Sinead would be looking at it.
That's a great poem.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, well, as mentioned at the top of the hour here, at the top of the show, I was, there's a lot of kind of news-inspired sort of phraseology and work, but that I've been doing, just, kind of embedding in my poetry and my kind of rants and turning them into hopefully some poetry later on in one way. But this is a poem that I think this first part I will read it, and then I'll have one more for you guys. But it's just called The News, and it's sort of how will find something here. You'll hear what it's about. Not the most pleasant thing, but it's something on the news, and then I remember the day, I think it was Boris Yeltsin died or Solzhenitsyn died or something like that. I was trying to find that poem. I don't know what I did with that poem. It's somewhere, but I was like, oh, I'm going to start there. And then, sort of like I mentioned that the story with all these other famous people dying. And with 2016 too, for example, I have not written the 2016 story. We had lost like Bowie and Petty and
There's a huge,
so many.
Yeah, huge loss in the industry.
Yeah, Prince, I believe.
Prince,
Yeah, that was, and then we also got a terrible election that year too.
It was a bad year.
That was a tough year. But anyway, this is just called The News, and this is kind of how I kind of often will go about this maybe more esoteric kind of like adaptation and bring it down to the individual. But it's just called The News. Remember when that teacher fed the puppy to the turtle and the weather dropped and the king died of syphilis and that cat got torn up by those children who also had children dying? Did we kiss that night? I believed in you, like bottled glue in elementary school, or Play-Doh, or maybe deviled eggs. So animals, always dying on the news, right? And I guess other places too. We like to watch the news, thrills and such, and damn it, and fuck it, animals. We're animals, but hey, you and me, spearmint gum, crooked noses, half-truths, a clean, warm neck. That was all the start of something special. It's a little snapshot.
Great. Yeah, no, I love it.
Did we kiss that night?
Yeah.
I love that beat.
Yeah. Well, with all the things too,
Yeah.
just pushed in there and then trying to remember. Like you
Yeah.
remember the news, but you can't remember if you kissed that night.
But it's equal.
Yeah.
That's as current in your memory as all those other things that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, as urgent.
And that was a story, I don't know if you guys remember that story, but that some elementary school teacher had, I don't know how that
Yes.
happened, but they some snapping turtles were
Yes.
in a cage with a puppy, and I don't think they actually fed it to the to the turtles, but this puppy was killed by kind of eaten by these snapping turtles. Vicious beasts. But and I remember it made the news, and then the teacher was, because the kids came across it and I don't think that it was his or her.
That's when you
intention.
throw the teacher in with the snapping turtle.
I
next.
know.
Like,
But that was
That's
something
the
that was
story
like
I would
absurd,
end up writing as a sequel.
And there was some king
Please
somewhere,
do. Please do.
Yeah, some king somewhere died of syphilis on the news as well. And then anyway,
if only that could happen in America.
yes, I know. I have been listening to my Elvis Costello, King of America. Still going back to our last episode, or was it? Yeah, it was the last one with that. Yeah, he thought he was the King of America. But this is taken from from our current admin, and just calling it, I guess I can call it whatever, it seeks to purge, but the federal government has been seeking to purge these words from initiatives agencies have flagged, these basically to sort of be removed from official government documents. And this is a sample of some of them. And I think it can work as a poem. of sorts. At risk, barriers, all-inclusive, allyship, anti-racism, anti-racist, assigned at birth, assigned female at birth, assigned male at birth, at risk, biologically female, breastfeed plus people, breastfeed plus person, chest feed plus people, chest feed plus person, clean energy, climate science, climate crisis, culturally responsive, disability, discrimination, disparity, diversified, diversify, diversifying, enhance the diversity, enhancing diversity, environmental equality, females, female, fostering inclusivity, identity, Hispanic minority, health equity, implicit biases, inclusion, sexual preferences, sexuality, socioeconomic, tribal, traumatic, unconscious bias, victim, victims, vulnerable populations, women, women, and underrepresented, they, them, trans, transgender, transsexual, trauma, status, sexuality, inequalities, key groups, Latinx.
Haunting.
Yeah, and that's some bullshit
Haunting.
right there.
Yeah.
Yes, like, what do you think? These are people, and also this is us. This is America. This is. I mean, these are words removing from documents.
These are, I mean,
to try to influence what our society looks like.
The interesting thing is the list of words, quote unquote, is a list of human beings. On the other side of those words is a list of
Right.
of identity,
Right.
and removing identity, right?
Yes.
And essentially,
And afraid
right?
of those things that if those were put in, we don't know the documents they're removing them from.
Well, I know the NEA was asked to take
Yeah.
those words out.
And
Like
they're
I read
removing
that
them
document.
from Arlington Cemetery. We get that news the other day, and it's like it's all over the place. But just the fact, there are people behind this, and also that was a very small sample that I
Right.
read, and this is like hundreds and hundreds of words.
Yeah.
That it's like really, what's your DEI fear, people? What you scared of there, Mr. Project 2025? Mike Johnson, whomever you are, all y'all.
I want to make a case for. I don't know that I would still subscribe to it, but I want to make a devil's advocate case for being really on the nose about current events. As a former historian, when you look back at the historical record, historians value few things more than people actually talking about the shit happening in the moment that they're studying.
Right.
And when you go back to, quote unquote, the primary sources, you don't treasure anything more than somebody who's living through those events, writing about those events as those events occur to them.
Well, I was going to bring up Walt Whitman as a great example of that right today.
Yeah,
I thought
and Frank.
And Frank, yeah.
Did
Walt Whitman,
they get criticized for being on the nose, or are we just being assholes?
Well, we never read them till
Direct.
later.
Right.
Like, the thing is, we don't read those accounts till later.
But they wrote
Whitman
them
was
then.
publishing a lot. I mean, there was a lot. Journalism happened differently, so he was sort of a journalist. Yeah,
Yeah,
in
that's
that.
true.
But also,
That's
he
true.
was. I don't know if he'd call himself a journalist, but I mean, yeah, it was. But
There were Roman
yeah.
poets writing in the moment about the emperors who were either executed or going to get executed because of what they wrote, and they wrote them anyways, and
Right.
historians love them.
I know that's true.
So, how is it that we don't consider things that are on the nose and speak directly at the issue in the moment art?
I think they do when it comes
I
from
hope
the
we
heart.
could.
I mean, my point is, what angsts me is when somebody purposely is pushing it
Yeah.
just to get published.
Yeah,
It's the intention
Yeah.
behind why you're writing it.
Yeah.
I think having the real conversation between you and the page, you and your medium of art, you and another friend, and you're passionate about it. It's moving through you, and you can feel that.
Right.
You can
Right.
feel that in the pieces you both just mentioned, Whitman and Anne Frank's diary. This is somebody's life and how they're seeing what's happening. That is far different.
Right.
It comes back to the intention of why are you writing it? Which I think almost always comes back to every episode when we get down to our angst. It's like the why behind it is what ends up pissing us off, right?
Right. I mean, there was, and I do think, there's countless examples, I'm sure, but like there's a writer, Phil Cly, who wrote Redeployment, which is a collection of short stories. He's gone on to write a lot about all sorts of more political things, but it was about Iraq, Afghanistan, as he was and I'm just coming up with this off the floor here, like trying to remember everything in his book, but basically it's like battlefield accounts, or someone like Tim O'Brien, someone like that. If you're looking at war, or kind of like the Whitman-esque, I mean, those are both fiction writers I mentioned here, and Whitman is bringing, so there, I mean, there's this, I think it's out there, but you're right. I mean, I think it just can be clumsy or just like two-dimensional. When it's not working well, and that's maybe when it becomes on the nose and it's hard to, and I personally don't want to do that as a writer, so I get scared of stuff. Maybe I do shy away. I'm not very good at nonfiction. I'm looking at myself in the mirror and like writing about myself. So I'm not the best one to like stare at the. I could maybe stare at the world, but yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, I mean, someone like Joan Didion as well as an essayist is great. One of my favorites, like Slouching Towards Bethlehem. That particular long essay is like one of the best things I've ever read in my life. But she was a journalist as well as an essayist and an artful writer. And kind of turn the essay into art or like a, I guess in
personal, she turned the essay into a personal essay. Like really, she's like at the heart of that.
So it's a good question though, but how to do it artfully? It's like,
I think it's heartfully, not artfully. I think you can do it artfully. It could still be crafty. It can still have all the devices, but it's like, is the duende in there? Is the heart in there? Right? Yeah, like the fire. Is that part of it? Like, are you moved to write it, right? That, or create it, whatever it is, a song. You can feel that in music too. When you listen to music, it's like, oh, we're just putting out cookie cutter things because it's timely to put this out, versus somebody who really has poured their heart into their music, right?
Right. Yeah, protest.
I mean, that's
songs.
just my opinion. Yeah, protest songs. Yeah,
I know it is interesting. I haven't heard a lot of. Like maybe in like hip hop, you hear some more protest songs. I'm trying to think of a good. I guess in maybe some kind of lo-fi, countrified, kind of like let's talk about America songs, but political stuff. I don't know. I think that like musical art.
I have not really heard much political songs lately. Like really, like that hit the charts.
I know.
At all. Come on, musicians, man, step up. Where are you? Like, we're working our asses off here.
Is it because they're competing against all of these other sources of information? I mean, like when CCR put out Fortunate Son, I have to think that the reason that song has had such a long history and has even become a joke, right? There are memes about how you can't have a Vietnam movie without a scene that has that song in it.
It's true.
But they were writing about exactly what was going on in that moment, and it resonated, and it continued to resonate. But I wonder if it's because they weren't drowned out by all of these other sources of information and podcasts. I think so. But now.
Yeah, and streaming devices, like we are bombarded. We have too many options.
Escape. Music is more escape in a certain way. But I mean, there are some, I do know, like I'm a fan of our man Jason Isbell, who's a great songwriter, in that kind of Americana country sort of realm, which I don't listen to a lot of, but he's a very, sort of incredible lyricist, kind of, that's a good throw. He does get into speaking to, I guess like Kendrick Lamar's kind of do that, or kind of like not that I am super steeped in his work, but I think people do maybe want more. I've been kind of turning to music, honestly, live music. I've always been a music, sort of fan and attendee at shows, but I've got a number of shows lined up. It's like such a great escape.
It's so nice. And maybe that's what people want. Like it's the same with like, I'm going to watch some comedy. Like I just can't get anything darker in my body right now, right? Like it's too much for me to hold. So
watch some Seinfeld and fall asleep.
Right.
I go back to so I don't know. Those were all. Thank you guys for reading those. And then I had it's stuff we could all keep channeling, and I can definitely this morning's writings, my little journaling, had some things in there that could be kind of torn from the news to a degree, and kind of run through the filter of humanity and characters a bit. But I don't know. There's lots of material for us to tap into.
I
out
do
there
want
in
to
the world.
say, like, for nonfiction writers, like, I do think it's important to weave in, when you go back, the things you recall about the current events, right? And if you include those in your journal and how you felt about them at the time, it does flesh out, like, how your life is being influenced. And I think that's important,
Yeah.
So, and in character development too, like the setting, part of it is what's culturally happening, what's the pulse of the culture in that moment, right? So it's that's another character, really. So I think it's important. It's just how is it used? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the primary sources. I mean, that is true. These could, our stuff could be used as that ideally down the road, but I don't know. Well, we could talk about this for a long time, but
hopefully none of us will be assassinated anytime soon for our writings.
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know.
Although there's a part of me that really hopes that I'm relevant enough to run the risk.
I know, right?
That would suggest that I have we're
Right.
I know.
Silly us.
Yeah,
Who the hell do I think I am?
That's a good point too. Like I guess in the West we haven't had a lot of, thankfully yet. Not like journalists killed or fiction writers, your Salman Rushdies of the world, or you hear about in in the East and in Russia, and then there's sort of like voices that are running counter to those in power. I mean, we still hear about those kind of state killings. It's sort of
we're not far.
I know. Well, I know. I mean,
I know. Yeah. It's a little terrifying.
Is it bad that I secretly hope to be banned?
I think I think like longing to be banned is a good thing, like because you're writing.
I'm not writing to be banned. I'm writing the stories that I want to write, but
you're welcoming. I
don't know that I welcome it, but something. There's that badge of honor that you just don't want, but if it gets pinned on you, fuck it, I'll wear it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the Johnny Evison story. Jonathan Evison. Didn't intend such things.
I don't know. The piece you read today might end up being banned. Right.
I tell people
once we publish it under, what would be a good title to get it into the library? We can just get it in.
I tell people if you read my novel and you like it, awesome. Thank you so much. Please say something somewhere, because that's how people read your stuff, through word of mouth. If you don't like it, I'm really sorry. I know that not every book's for everybody, but if you don't like it, please do me a huge favor and take it to the office of your least favorite regressive politician and throw it from the door onto the admin's desk and yell, "Have you read that filth?" and then run.
Yeah.
And then hope that someone reads the first chapter, and then all hell breaks loose.
I know.
That's the best thing you could do for me if you hate my writing.
This is Tomas's marketing scheme. I'm just going to
we could get you into some libraries. So you could mock up those little tabs they have on the back of books. It looks like a library, and you could start putting them around in different libraries. And
my gosh.
Maybe depends on just how.
And then our show gets banned. Our podcast.
Yeah.
Those three angsty poets, the advice they're giving other writers.
I know.
You're welcome.
We'll play taps on the tappers. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I was thinking we could play a little CCR, right, on the opening and closing.
Yeah. Fortunate Son. Sure.
Yeah. Fortunate Son.
I know. Do we have the rights?
No.
Yeah, that's okay. Then.
How old is it? How does that song?
68, 69?
I don't know. We should look in. It's over 50 years old.
Or we could play it in like 2-second bursts.
Yeah, I think it's under 13 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I can't remember ASCAP rules with that, but I'll look it up. Let you know.
Yeah, I don't know. All
right, Christian, close us out.
Closing.
We'll be here all day.
Okay.
We'll talk and talk and talk because we're
rounding this out at right about an hour. That's pretty good for us. That's pretty good. Yeah. So what is this? A wrap? This is the wrap. And you've heard our angst, at least for now. We are the three angsty poets. Myself, Christian Winn, here with Tomas Baiza and Rebecca Evans. And we do have more angst to share.
Never ending.
Yes, you'll hear from us real soon.
Be good and don't piss anybody off, people.
No, piss everybody
do.
off.
Yes,
Piss them off.
that's right.
Speak your mind.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll be back next Monday. Tune in.